It was a quiet morning in the city, the sun peeking over the horizon, casting golden light across the streets. The usual hustle and bustle of the urban environment had already begun, but for me, this day was different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. My auntie from the village was coming to visit. She'd been talking about it for months, and now the day had finally arrived. Growing up, I'd always heard stories about my aunt's life in the village. She lived a simple life, disconnected from the fast-paced urban world. Her world was filled with fields, animals, and the peaceful rhythm of rural life. My parents often spoke of her with admiration, saying she was one of the last true village women who kept the traditions alive. Her visits were rare, and when she did come to the city, it was a big event. My aunt had a unique way of dressing. She wore traditional clothes made of bright, earthy fabrics. The loose-fitting blouse, long skirts and headscarves were a stark contrast to the more fashionable attire worn by my city friends. But there was something endearing about her outfit. She always seemed to carry an aura of calm, as though she existed in her own world where time moved a little slower. I couldn't wait to see her again. The day of her visit arrived, and I woke up early, trying to prepare for her arrival. My parents were busy in the kitchen, cooking up a storm. There would be a big meal when Auntie arrived, with all of her favorite dishes. Mum was making her signature spicy stew, and Dad had insisted on grilling some meat, just the way Auntie liked it. As I sat at the dining table, waiting for the sound of the car pulling up outside, I couldn't help but feel nervous. Auntie had always been so kind and warm, but she was also very different from the people I was used to seeing every day. I wondered if she would find the city too overwhelming, or if she would enjoy the modern comforts we had. Would she still prefer the simplicity of village life, or would she be fascinated by the city's technology and hustle? The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I rushed to answer it, and there she was, my auntie, standing at the doorstep with her large woven basket in hand, just as I remembered her from my childhood. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and she enveloped me in a warm embrace. "Ah, my dear one, you've grown so tall," she exclaimed, stepping back to look at me. Her face was weathered from years of working outdoors, but her smile was as radiant as ever. I could smell the faint scent of earth and herbs in her clothes. It was a smell I had always associated with the village, and it brought back fond memories of my visits there. We led her into the living room, where she immediately made herself comfortable, settling into a chair with ease. My aunt was always so grounded, no matter where she was. The noise of the city, the rush of traffic outside, didn't seem to bother her. She was used to a different pace of life, one that was steady and deliberate. She asked about everyone's health, how the family was doing, and how the crops were faring this year in the village. But soon, it became clear that Auntie had come not just to visit, but also to teach. She had brought with her a basket full of fresh produce, tomatoes, yams, peppers, and even a few bundles of fresh herbs. "These are for your mother to cook with," she said. "Nothing beats fresh food grown in the village soil. You city people don't know what you're missing." Later that day, Auntie took me on a walk around the neighborhood. We passed by the local market, where she marveled at the variety of goods on display. I showed her the busy streets, the towering buildings, and the technology that had become so embedded in our lives. She was fascinated by it all, but also seemed somewhat bewildered. Every time she saw something new, she would laugh and shake her head. "You city people," she chuckled. "You have all these gadgets, but you don't know how to live. Back in the village, we don't need all these things. We make do with what we have." Auntie's words struck me. It wasn't just a criticism. It was a reminder of how disconnected we had become from the simpler pleasures in life. I had been so caught up in the whirlwind of city living that I had forgotten how much I appreciated the calm and peace that came with a slower, more intentional life. As the days passed, Auntie began to settle into the city, but she never fully embraced its chaos. She found solace in the quiet moments, spending hours sitting in the garden, watching the birds, or tending to the plants that had been neglected during the winter months. She brought with her a sense of tranquility that was contagious. It made me realize how much I had taken for granted the little things, like the sound of birds singing or the smell of fresh herbs in the air. The contrast between Auntie's village life and my fast-paced city existence became more apparent as the days went on. At night, while the city was still buzzing with activity, Auntie would sit by the window, sipping her herbal tea and telling stories of her life in the village. Her stories were filled with wisdom, laughter, and nostalgia. She spoke of the challenges she faced, but also the beauty of living a life that was in tune with nature. By the time Auntie's visit was coming to an end, I realized how much I had learned from her. It wasn't just about the food she brought or the stories she told. It was about the way she lived her life, slowly, deliberately, with an appreciation for the simple things. She taught me to pause, to breathe, and to connect with the world around me. The morning of her departure arrived too soon. Auntie packed her things, and we all gathered to say goodbye. My parents gave her a small bag of city treats, things she could enjoy during her journey back to the village. I hugged her tightly, not wanting her to leave, but also grateful for the time we had spent together. "Remember, my dear," Auntie said with a wink. "Don't forget where you come from. There's wisdom in the village, even if the world doesn't see it." As she left, I stood at the door, watching her walk down the street, her silhouette growing smaller as she made her way back to the simpler life she loved. I knew that I would carry a piece of her with me, and I also knew that the next time she visited, things would be different. I would see the world through her eyes, with a new appreciation for the beauty of simplicity.